An HOA fined a factory owner thousands of dollars for noise. They claimed he was violating community rules. They told him to shut down, reduce operations, and pay the penalties or face legal action. What they didn't know was that this factory had been operating legally for decades, backed by city zoning, state permits, and written protections that existed long before the HOA ever formed. The factory wasn't the problem. The neighborhood changed around it. And when the HOA tried to enforce rules they had no authority to enforce, the city stepped in. The fines were erased, and the power dynamic completely flipped. This isn't just a story about noise. It's about who actually has authority, what happens when communities overreach, and why paperwork can be more powerful than pressure. Stay with this story, because by the end, you'll understand how a small group tried to shut down a legal business, and how the law shut them down instead. The factory sat at the edge of town, in an industrial corridor that had existed long before anyone thought about building homes nearby. For decades, it ran steadily. Heavy machinery hummed, trucks rolled in and out, employees clocked in early and left late. Every process was documented, every permit displayed on the wall. The owner, Michael, treated his factory like a living organism. It wasn't just a business, it was his livelihood, his employees' lifelines, their family's security. He knew every rule, every code, every inspection requirement. Compliance wasn't optional, it was sacred. But cities change. What was once a quiet industrial zone slowly transformed. Developers built townhouses, condos followed, and eventually a homeowners association, or HOA, was formed. The factory didn't move, the neighborhood did. At first, everything was quiet. Complaints were minor, emails, polite questions, suggestions. Michael responded respectfully, explaining hours operations, permits, and the legal status of the factory. Most people understood, most people accepted it. But then a small group of neighbors began pushing harder. They formed committees, held HOA meetings, discussed the noise problem and how it affected property values. Michael continued to act professionally, answering emails, attending meetings, explaining zoning laws, operational schedules, and city permits. But for some residents, it wasn't enough. Then the first warning letter arrived. Official HOA letterhead, bold red text, notice of violation. Excessive noise in violation of community standards, it read. Attached was a fine, thousands of dollars. The HOA demanded changes that would affect the factory's operation, hours, machinery, even production schedules. Michael was stunned, confused, angry. He had followed every law, paid every fee, operated for decades without complaint. How could a neighborhood association override decades of legal precedent? His employees worried too. Families asked, "Are we shutting down?" Michael didn't have an answer. Not yet. Here's the key point. Many people think an HOA can enforce its rules on everyone within its boundaries, but that's not how it works. HOAs cannot override city zoning, they cannot ignore state permits, and they cannot create laws that contradict legal protections already in place. The law protects businesses that were legally established before residential developments moved in. Michael's factory had every right to continue its operations. But the HOA didn't stop. They sent more letters, another fine, penalties mounted. They demanded reduced hours, quieter machinery, and operational changes that would have crippled the factory. Every day the pressure increased. Michael felt trapped. Employees were anxious, families worried. The factory's very future seemed under threat. The injustice was palpable. How could a small group of homeowners threaten a legally protected operation? Michael couldn't understand it. Every phone call, every letter, every HOA meeting felt like an ambush. But panic would not solve the problem. Fear would not protect the factory. Michael needed a strategy, something concrete, legal, unassailable. He returned to his files, reviewed city permits, zoning approvals, and environmental impact statements. Every signature, every stamped approval, every date was in order. The factory was protected. It had legal precedence over any HOA rules that came later. This wasn't just paperwork, it was armor, it was the law, it was the power that could protect him and his employees. Michael drafted a formal response to the HOA. Not emotional, not aggressive, legal, precise. Every word emphasized the factory's protected status, citing city ordinances, state laws, and documented approvals. He demanded that the fines be revoked immediately and that the HOA cease further harassment. The HOA, however, did not back down. They sent more letters, threatening escalating penalties, even hinting at lawsuits. But Michael escalated to the city. He presented every document and explained the situation, an HOA attempting to enforce rules on a legally protected industrial operation. The city reviewed the case. They examined zoning history, permits, and compliance records. Then the response came. The city stated clearly the HOA had overstepped its authority. Not only were the fines invalid, but continued interference could result in legal consequences against the HOA itself. Every document Michael had submitted now carried weight beyond mere proof. It was the law, backing him fully. Relief washed over Michael. But it wasn't just relief, it was vindication. Years of following rules, documenting every action, and operating ethically had paid off. The HOA could no longer issue fines or demand changes. Word of the dispute spread. Social media exploded with opinions. Local news outlets covered the story. Headlines read, "HOA fined factory owner, city steps in." Public opinion was divided, but the law was clear. The HOA grew desperate. Some members considered lawsuits, others realized continued action could backfire legally. Their power had diminished, and Michael remained calm, focusing on his employees and production. Months passed. The factory operated without disruption. Employees returned to normal routines, families breathed easier, and the noise became a symbol of lawful perseverance rather than conflict. The HOA finally acknowledged their limits, issuing a restrained apology for misunderstandings. This story teaches a universal lesson. Authority exists in layers. Community rules cannot supersede city law. Documentation, compliance, and knowledge of your rights are your strongest defense. Persistence, professionalism, and calm preparation can turn even overwhelming threats into victory. Michael's factory hums today. Trucks roll. Production continues. The noise that once frustrated neighbors now represents resilience and lawful protection. If you've ever faced intimidation by neighbors, committees, or organizations, remember, preparation and knowledge of the law can protect you, even against collective pressure. Now I want to hear from you. Have you experienced HOA overreach or unfair fines? Share your stories in the comments below. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more real-life stories where preparation, law, and resilience triumph over intimidation. Remember, whether it's noise complaints, fines, or overreach of authority, there is always a way to stand firm legally, ethically, and confidently. This is not just a story about a factory, it's a story about rights, resilience, and the quiet strength of preparation.